Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The Iron Mina was a bucket of bolts, but she was Jace's bucket. 32 years hauling scrap and legalish cargo across the Zedra sector had worn the ship's hull to a dull gray, matching Jace's stubble and his mood. He flicked a grease-stained glove at the navigation console, silencing a whining alarm. "Shut up. We're docked. Nothing's on fire." The station Orbital 7 buzzed outside, a rusty donut of flickering lights and tired merchants. Jace's cargo, medical supplies for a backwater colony, was already unloaded. All that remained was a pre-flight check, a protein bar, and another silent jump to nowhere special. Then the Mina's gravity plate hiccuped. Jace froze. The plate never glitched. He paid a smuggler named Dex 2 bottles of Turin whiskey to calibrate it last cycle. Cursing, he crouched to pry open the floor panel, and a small 3-fingered hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. "Don't scream," hissed a voice from the crawlspace. Jace screamed. A lithe figure tumbled out, rolling to a crouch. Blue skin, luminescent violet eyes, and a wild tangle of silver hair streaked with cobalt. She wore a patched-up flight suit 3 sizes too big, the sleeves knotted at her elbows. A Riftborn. Jace had only seen them in dodgy holos. "You're trespassing," he said, reaching for the stun baton on his belt. The alien girl, Nixie, grinned, showing sharpened canines. "And you're boring. But we can fix that." Before Jace could react, she slammed her palm onto the ship's mainframe. The Mina's engines roared to life, undocking clamps screeching in protest. "Hey!" Jace lunged, but Nixie flipped over him, landing boots first on the pilot's chair. She yanked the throttle. The ship lurched, throwing Jace into a wall as the viewport filled with streaking starlines. They were jumping. Unauthorized. Uncharted. Nixie whooped, spinning the chair. "First rule of stealing a ship, human. Never ask permission." Jace groaned, clutching his ribs. "You're not stealing her. You're wrecking her." "Same difference." She tapped the nav console, pulling up a star map Jace didn't recognize. "We're going here." A pulsing red dot blinked near a collapsed nebula. "That's Vorath space. They skin trespassers." Nixie's grin faltered. "Yeah. And they'll do worse to me if they catch us. So fly faster." The proximity alarm blared. On the rear scanner, 3 jagged black ships materialized, their hulls bristling with spine-like cannons. Vorath hunters. Nixie's hands flew over the controls, rerouting power in ways that made the Mina's wiring scream. "Hold onto your organs, Jace. We're dancing." The ship barrel rolled into the jump stream, just as the Vorath opened fire. Jace's last thought before the G-forces knocked him out. "I should have stayed bored." Jace woke to the sound of the Iron Mina screaming. Not metaphorically. The ship's engines were shrieking like a dying animal, metal groaning under stress he'd never heard before. His vision swam as he pulled himself up, gripping the edge of the co-pilot's chair. The viewport was a blur of streaked starlight, the ship caught in a turbulent jump stream. Nixie was still in the pilot's seat, her hands a blur across the controls. She wasn't just flying. She was conducting, fingers dancing between switches, her body swaying as if listening to music only she could hear. "What the hell did you do to my ship?" Jace rasped. She didn't look at him. "Saved it. And you. Mostly you." The proximity alarm warbled. On the rear display, the 3 Vorath hunters were still there, their jagged silhouettes flickering in and out of the jump stream. "They're following us." Jace's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. Nothing tails a ship mid-jump." Nixie's jaw tightened. "Vorath drones can. They're phase-locked, anchored to our energy signature." She flicked a series of switches, and the Mina lurched sideways, skimming the edge of the jump lane. "But they hate turbulence. So we dance." Jace barely had time to grab the seat restraints before the ship spun, flipping end over end in a maneuver that should have torn them apart. The Vorath drones hesitated, their formation breaking as they struggled to adjust. Nixie laughed, wild and bright. See, they're predictable. Jace's teeth rattled. I'm gonna throw up. Not on my console. She punched the thrusters, and the Mina surged forward, the jump stream warping around them in chaotic ribbons. The art of running. Jace had flown for decades. He knew calculated jumps, pre-plotted routes, the safe and steady paths between stars. Nixie flew like fire in zero-G. She wove through the jump stream like it was a living thing, her movements instinctive, reckless. She didn't follow lanes, she cut them, bending the ship's trajectory in ways that made the navigation computer screech in protest. "What are you?" Jace finally asked, watching her reroute power from life support to the thrusters like it was nothing. "Alive. For now." She shot him a glance, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim cockpit. "You humans always need labels. I'm riftborn. We don't like cages." The comms crackled. A voice, deep and mechanical, sliced through the static. "Surrender the Starweaver. You will not be pursued further." Jace stiffened. "Starweaver?" Nixie's fingers tightened on the controls. "Shut up and hold on." She slammed the emergency jump trigger. The Mina bucked, the jump stream collapsing around them in a violent spiral. Space twisted, reality itself groaning as the ship was ripped from FTL and hurled into real space with a bone-jarring crash. Jace's head smacked the console. When his vision cleared, the Vorith drones were gone. But so was the jump lane. They floated in dead space, the Mina's engines sputtering. Outside, the wreckage of ancient ships drifted in eerie silence, a graveyard of forgotten fleets. Nixie exhaled, slumping in her seat. "Welcome to the Ghost Belt." The unwelcome truth. Jace rubbed his temples. "Okay. Explanation. Now." Nixie hesitated, then tapped a hidden panel on her forearm. A hologram flickered to life. A DNA helix, but wrong, its strands shifting like liquid. "I'm engineered," she said quietly. "Vorith made me to navigate the unstable lanes, the ones their ships can't survive. I can feel the jumps, see the paths." Jace stared. "You're a living nav computer." "I'm a weapon," she corrected. "They wanted to mass-produce us. Turn the whole riftborn species into warp drive puppets." Her voice turned bitter. "I escaped. They'd really want me back." Jace leaned back, processing. "So you hijacked my ship because you were docked, and your engine's old enough to overclock without exploding." Mostly. Before she could answer, the Mina scanners pinged. Something was moving in the wreckage. Not Vorith. Something worse. The iron Mina shuddered as the unknown signal pulsed through the wreckage. Jace's fingers flew across the damaged console, trying to boost scanner resolution through the interference. Static distorted the feed, but something was definitely moving out there. Something big. Nixie didn't wait for confirmation. She slammed her palm against the emergency thrusters, sending the ship lurching sideways just as a massive shape loomed out of the debris field. It wasn't Vorith. The silhouette was all wrong. Organic curves instead of angular plating, its surface pocked with what looked like growths rather than armor. "Kaseri patrol ship," Nixie breathed, her fingers tightening on the controls. "We need tow." A beam of violet energy lanced past the viewport, close enough to make the Mina's shields scream in protest. Jace grabbed the co-pilot's yoke, fighting to stabilize their spin. "You said they were exiles. Why are they shooting at us?" "Because they think I'm here to finish what the Vorith started." Nixie banked hard, weaving through the wreckage as the Kaseri ship fired again. The energy pulses weren't aimed to kill. They were hurting, forcing the Mina toward a massive derelict at the graveyard's heart. The comm crackled. A voice, layered with harmonics that made Jace's teeth ache, filled the cockpit. "Starweaver, you will dock, or you will burn." Nixie's jaw clenched. She looked at Jace, her luminous eyes flickering with something he couldn't read. Fear, maybe, or resignation. "They're not giving us a choice. The Kesseri ship forced them toward the derelict, its bay doors yawning open like a mouth. As they crossed the threshold, Jace saw the truth of the place. This wasn't just a dead ship, it was a sanctuary, its hollowed-out interior glowing with bioluminescent growths, makeshift dwellings clinging to the ribs of the ancient hull. The Mina touched down with a groan of protesting landing struts. Outside, figures emerged from the shadows, tall, willowy beings with skin like polished obsidian, their movements too smooth, too fluid. Kesseri. The lead exile stepped forward, her four-fingered hands raised in a gesture that might have been peace or threat. "You should not have come here, little weaver," she hissed. "The dance is not yours to control." Nixie straightened, her chin lifting. "I didn't come to dance. I came to hide." The Kesseri's lips peeled back in what might have been a smile. "There is no hiding from the song. You know this." Jace stepped between them, hands raised. "Look, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but we're just passing through. We don't want trouble." The Kesseri's gaze slid to him, her pupils contracting to slits. "Human, you travel with a storm and think you will not get wet." She turned, gesturing for them to follow. "Come. The speaker will decide your fate." As they were led deeper into the derelict, Jace caught glimpses of the Kesseri's home, gardens of crystalline fungi, pools of liquid light, children with two bright eyes watching from the shadows. It was beautiful. It was wrong. Nixie walked like someone marching to an execution. "They think I'm a weapon," she murmured, so low only Jace could hear. He kept his voice equally quiet. "Are you?" She didn't answer. The speaker's chamber was at the heart of the ship, its walls pulsing with slow rhythmic light. The ancient Kesseri who waited there was little more than a skeleton wrapped in translucent skin, her elongated fingers resting on a device that looked grown rather than built. "You bring fire to our home, Starweaver," the speaker croaked. "The Vorath hunt you. They will burn this place to ash to reclaim you." Nixie lifted her chin. "I didn't ask to be made. I didn't ask to run. But I won't let them take me back." The speaker's milky eyes shifted to Jace. "And you, human, what do you seek in this?" Jace hesitated. A week ago, he'd have said he wanted his ship back, his quiet life. Now, "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm not letting them have her." The speaker exhaled, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "Then you will both die." She raised a trembling hand, and the device at her feet hummed to life, projecting a star map into the air. "Unless you learn why the Vorath fear the weave." The map shifted, showing a nexus point deep in Vorath space, a place where the jump lanes knotted together in impossible patterns. "The heart of the weave," the speaker whispered. "Destroy it, and you break their hold. But to reach it," her gaze settled on Nixie, "you must do what no Starweaver has ever done." Nixie went very still. "You want me to pull a ship through the blind eternity?" The speaker nodded. "And survive." Jace looked between them. "What the hell is the blind eternity?" Nixie turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "The space between jumps. The nowhere." She swallowed. "No one comes back from there." Outside, alarms began to wail. The Vorath had found them. The speaker smiled, showing needle-thin teeth. "Then you'd better be the first." The alarms shrieked through the derelict ship like a wounded animal. Jace felt the vibration of distant impacts shudder through the deck plates. The Vorath weren't just searching anymore. They were cutting their way in. Nixie grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "We need to move. Now." The speaker was already retreating into the shadows, her skeletal form disappearing between the pulsing bioluminescent growths. The other Kesseri scattered like startled birds, melting into the labyrinth of their makeshift home. Jace followed Nixie at a dead run, their boots splashing through shallow pools of glowing liquid. "Where are we going?" he shouted over the cacophony of rending metal. "Back to the Mina." She skidded around a corner, nearly colliding with a group of Kesseri children being herded to safety. One looked up at Nixie with wide, knowing eyes, too old for such a young face, and whispered something in that harmonic language that made Nixie flinch. They burst into the docking bay just as the far wall exploded inward. A Vorath breach team poured through the smoke, their armored suits bristling with weapon nodes. Jace didn't think. He drew the pulse pistol from his hip and fired 3 wild shots, forcing them to scatter. Nixie was already at the Mina's ramp, fingers flying over the access panel. "Come on, you stubborn piece-off." The hatch hissed open, and she practically threw herself inside. Jace backed up the ramp, firing until his pistol overheated, then slammed the manual close button with his elbow. The engines were still warm. Nixie had them lifting off before Jace even reached the cockpit. Through the viewport, he saw the Vorath troops turning their weapons on the ship, then suddenly collapsing as the Kessari struck from the shadows, their slender forms moving with terrifying precision. "Those aren't just refugees," Jace breathed as the Mina cleared the derelict. "No," Nixie said grimly. "They're what's left of the Kessari war fleet, the ones who refused to surrender when the Vorath came for their Starweavers." She punched in a jump sequence with more force than necessary. "Now hold on to something. This is going to hurt." The jump was unlike anything Jace had experienced. There was no smooth transition, no gradual acceleration. 1 second they were in real space, the next the universe tore open around them in a scream of tortured physics. The Mina's hull groaned like a living thing, console displays shorting out in sprays of sparks. Jace's vision whited out from the pain, his bones vibrating at frequencies that shouldn't exist. Then, silence. The main viewer showed only blackness, not the black of space, but an absolute void, as if the stars had been erased. The Mina floated in perfect stillness, her systems dead. Even the ever-present hum of the life support was gone. Jace tried to speak, but his voice made no sound. He reached for Nixie, saw her lips moving but couldn't hear the words. Her face was lit by an eerie glow coming from inside her. Beneath her skin, luminous patterns swirled like captured galaxies, growing brighter with every second. Then the screaming started. Not from the ship, not from them, from the void itself. A chorus of impossible voices rising in agony or ecstasy. Jace couldn't tell which. The blackness beyond the viewport began to ripple, shapes moving in the nothingness, vast beyond comprehension. Nixie's hands flew across the dead controls, her glowing fingers leaving afterimages in the air. Tears of blood streaked her cheeks from the strain, but she kept working, her mouth forming the same words over and over, a prayer or a curse. The Mina shuddered. A single console light flickered, then another. The engines coughed, spluttered, and with a final gut-wrenching lurch, reality slammed back into place with the force of a supernova. Jace gasped as sound and sensation returned all at once. The viewer showed normal space, an unfamiliar starfield dotted with the distinctive blue nebula of the Tannhauser Gateway. They'd crossed half the sector in a single jump. Nixie collapsed forward onto the controls, her glow fading. "Told you," she whispered hoarsely. "Now you've seen it. The blind eternity." Jace stared at her, then at the perfectly normal stars outside. What was that? What were those things? The reason no one survives the eternity. She wiped the blood from her face with a trembling hand. The Vorath call them the Forgotten. The Kessari say they're the first Starweavers, the ones who got lost. Her breath hitched. Now you know why the speaker said we have to destroy the heart. If the Vorath learn to control that, there won't be anywhere left to run. The comm panel beeped suddenly, an incoming transmission on an old military band. Jace reached for it automatically, then froze when he saw the origin code. Not Vorath, not Kessari. Human. Nixie's eyes met his. "You said you didn't know what you wanted," she murmured. "Time to choose, Jace. We're not the only ones fighting this war." The transmission waited, its ping the only sound in the suddenly too small cockpit. Somewhere beyond the viewport, The twin suns of Tannhauser burned cold and blue, their light glinting off something massive and metallic in high orbit. Something that hadn't been on any of Jace's charts. Something that looked suspiciously like a battle fleet. The transmission light pulsed like a heartbeat. Jace's finger hovered over the console. 30 years of running silent, of avoiding entanglements. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore it. But Nixie's gaze burned into him, her blue skin still flickering with fading luminescence from their ordeal. He accepted the transmission. Static resolved into a familiar face, Captain Elias Voss, his old flight instructor from the Terran Naval Academy. The man hadn't aged well. A brutal scar bisected his left eyebrow, and his uniform bore the insignia of the Outer Rim Resistance. Veldran, Voss's voice crackled with barely contained fury. When Intel said a rogue freighter just tore through the blind eternity, I prayed it wasn't you. Nixie stiffened. Jace kept his voice flat. You're a long way from Terra, Captain. Everyone's a long way from home these days. The camera panned back to reveal a tactical display. Dozens of warships clustered around a massive jump gate. The Voreth just took Cerberus Station. 50,000 souls. Gone. Jace's stomach turned to ice. Cerberus was humanity's last deep space stronghold. Voss leaned closer. We found something in the wreckage. Records of their experiments. The screen split, showing grainy footage of a Voreth lab, and a humanoid figure writhing on an examination table, their skin rippling with the same luminous patterns Nixie had displayed. Nixie made a small, broken sound. You know what they're building, Voss said. Help us stop it. The transmission cut abruptly. Silence swallowed the cockpit. Outside, the Resistance fleet hung motionless against the stars, their weapons dark but primed. Nixie spoke first, her voice raw. They'll kill you if you go there. Probably. Jace studied the tactical display now burned into his screen. The Voreth Armada's position, their supply lines, the glaring vulnerability at the heart of the weave. But if we don't? She reached across the console, her three-fingered hand covering his. The contact sent an electric tingle up his arm. Then we do it properly. A wild light kindled in her violet eyes. No more running. The Mina's engines whined as Nixie routed all non-essential power to the weapons they didn't officially have. Jace input the coordinates Voss had embedded in the transmission, right into the belly of Voreth territory. As the jump drive spooled up, Nixie began humming, a strange, discordant melody that made the ship's metal vibrate in sympathy. The glow beneath her skin returned, but controlled now, purposeful. Jace matched her rhythm, his hand steady on the controls. The Resistance fleet winked out behind them as they plunged toward the storm. Somewhere in the void, the Forgotten wailed. This time, they answered.